Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Entrepreneur Secrets. We are fully obvious and excited to have you all here. So excited to talk to Jason today. I am Lee Days, founder and visionary of Obviously. We are a marketing studio focused on creative digital and marketing strategy, and especially love talking with CPG founders. It's so fun to talk about how you go from ideation to execution and then launching a national brand.
I'm Brad Ebenhoeh, CEO and founder of Accountfully. Accountfully is an outsourced accounting department that specializes in supporting emerging CPG brands. And our first ever, Accountfully's first ever CPG client was the new Primal, circa a decade ago. And we have the founder and CEO, Jason, here today. What's up, Jason?
Oh, what's going on, Brad? Good to see you, man.
Yeah, it's been a journey. So, Jason, let's get started on some background of the new Primal, and all you listeners there, go ahead and drop questions and comments and anything, feedback into the chat, and we'll respond as we move forward here. So give us a little background of new Primal and what you did and where you're at today.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, this thing started on my kitchen counter down in Charleston, South Carolina, where you are, Brad, and it was really by accident. I think most really great entrepreneurial ideas are in many cases, but this all started because my parents got sick, and both were diagnosed with chronic illnesses, both related to diet and lifestyle. And so I took a real keen interest in food and its impact on our health holistically, and learned to cook. That was really kind of the big takeaway. Is like I learned how to make my own food. And I was taking homemade beef jerky to work with me as just sort of like the protein snack that was going to keep me away from the candy bars, and it just always disappeared out of my desk drawer. So I finally started making people pay me for it. And people did. They dropped little like 10s and 20s on my desk with sticky notes on it, telling me to make beef jerky for them. And so, I spent the next, if I think about the next like 18 months of that journey before I quit my day job, I was just learning how to make beef jerky, and I was filling orders, and I set up a website, and people started, ordering. And then so finally, actually, we're coming up on the anniversary, September of 2012. I quit the day job and went full time into the better for you meat snacks business, but really flying really blind. I didn't know anything about consumer products, or I didn't know anything about grocery or any of the terms that people use in that space. Heck, certainly didn't know about accounting, Brad. And so, thank God we found you as early as we did. But it was just like, hey, I had a passion for a product that we were making. I thought it was a noble mission to sort of disrupt a category that I felt like was really toxic in most retail environments. And we kind of went hard there. Now, over the last decade, the company's evolved significantly as we've crossed a couple of categories. We kind of branched off, and we have this meat snacks division, and now we have this condiments and seasonings division. And we always like to bite off more than we can chew, and so we did that a few times. But today, as the new Primal, we have the new Primal meat snacks, and then we also have the Noble Made brand, which is our low sugar condiments and seasonings. And so we kind of run two brands in one today. And that was not necessarily intentional, all sort of, really, I think, kind of happy accidents along the way. But today we're in, I don't know, close to 10,000 retail locations. I've got 25 products on the global planogram at Whole Foods, probably the same at Sprouts, distribution with places like Wegmans and the Fresh Market and Harris Teeter and Walmart, and dipping the toe in the water with the club channel, with the Costco's of the world. And so, the last 11 years in the trenches have taught me a great deal about building a consumer products brand. And I've probably made every mistake that can be made, at least to this stage in my business. And so, any chance I get to talk about it and maybe even steer some people away from those same mistakes, I am more than willing to do so.
That's a great background. I have one question to start out. Like, as we look at 11 years, what was one recommendation or suggestion that you would make for somebody to get from year 0 to year 4? What was the most important thing that you did during those years, or somebody can do?
I mean, if you want, I can probably give you a few practical tips. I think the first, gosh, I think you're just going to quit 20 times in those first 4 years. I think you're just going to mentally, you're going to quit. you're going to get kicked in the face so many times you're going to quit. So I think like you got to really have a really strong reason for being and a really strong why on why you do this. Cause I just think those first 4 years, I don't care, like how well positioned you are for top line sales growth. There's going to be so many holes to fall in. Every single one is just going to feel like a massive setback. So, not a practical tip, but know your why so that when you do get kicked in the face, like you don't quit. Outside of that, I think for consumer products brands, I think, I think to survive the first 4 years, you've really got two options. Like you either need to like have some capital like ready to go. I think you gotta have money. You have working capital to sort of support your growth and your ability to navigate that. And you can do that a couple of different ways. You can go raise you can go raise equity, you can raise debt. You can find a really profitable sales channel, perhaps, that can fund that growth. But I think you've got to have a plan for capital in those first few years, or again, kind of a big pitfall you'll fall into. I don't care what kind of top line growth you're experiencing, you're gonna run out of money. And that's just the nature of the beast in consumer products. And so you better have a plan to not run out of money.
Cash is king.
That's right.
Jason, as you've been building out this company and it's grown so much, how are you spending the majority of your time in those first few years versus now? Like, was a lot of it raising capital and meeting with retailers, and now you're moving more into marketing and branding, or like, what does that shift look like?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think it's linear. First of all, like I think as a founder, you should know your strength. And I come from a sales background, and so I've always felt like I should lean in heavier on the sales side of the business, because I think that's just what I have natural tendencies towards. And so, that's whether that's raising money, because that's a full-on sales process, or that's building relationships with key retail partners where you have to, work on that and sell. Or, where I've guided that on the other side of the business operationally is like, hey, when you're managing, third-party logistics providers and co-packers and vendors, you also have to sell them on why they should work with you as a small brand. And so I think really early on, like I was, sort of in every single one of those buckets, just constantly selling people, whether it's on the idea, the concept, or like where we're going. And today, I don't know that it's that different, to be honest, because it's like, the team needs to be constantly reminded about the mission that we're on, and they have to be constantly be sold about where we're going with this. And like, they need to understand what the bigger picture is. And I still have to work on all of those relationships with key retailers. So, I'm a really hands-on founder, and, I kind of touch all parts of the business today. I just think it's like the stakes are much higher, and it's just, everything's bigger, and everything just feels a little more intense and a little more important. I probably spend more time with like lawyers and accountants today than I ever have. And so I think that's probably one thing that's probably changed. Like, you spend a lot more time in like, I spent a lot of time with my CFO, and I never thought I would. And very candidly, like the financial modeling and all of that is like not that interesting to me. Like I just want to go sell and win. But like it's sort of like necessary, right? It's like, okay, evolve into the role. Either you're going to stay the sales-minded CEO or sales-minded founder, and you need to go get an operator to run the thing, or evolve and be an operator. So, I think I have like, it would be like the equivalent of multiple business degrees over the past decade that I've gotten in the business. But I think today I probably spend a lot more time on high level strategy, what the next 3 years looks like, how do we build out the roadmap, and how do we start to execute towards that roadmap. Instead of just like, I think the first, few years, it's just all whack-a-mole. It's just all like, what problem's up today, go solve it. What problem's up today, go solve it. And that I'm not saying that doesn't exist to some extent, even now. But like, I have to think about the future a lot further out today than I did back then. It was just like survive, and play a lot more whack-a-mole back then.
Mm-hmm. When you mentioned working capital, cash, early in the years, right? So a big part of working capital as an inventory-based business is inventory, right? Understanding the cash cycle, money going out, money going in. So what are some best practices, challenges that you went through as growing as a first-time inventory-based entrepreneur, where you learned about inventory, managing inventory, best practices around inventory, etc.? Just kind of go down the rabbit hole with that.
Clearly, sure.
Managing inventory is a huge part of this.
Yeah, well, and I'll qualify anything that I say with it's extraordinarily difficult to forecast demand as an early stage brand, which informs inventory. So it's really hard to say, do I need to have 8 weeks of inventory on hand? And then what are the cash implications if I do that? Because distributors' orders are lumpy, and you think you're getting that big retail win, but then you don't, or they change their mind, or the reset gets pushed, 6 months. So I just want to qualify everything with it is certainly a little bit of a Rubik's Cube, but I think there are a couple of things. I think that cash is king, as you said, Brad, and I think that is absolutely imperative to always keep in mind. And so I would never go too long on inventory, even if you have to short orders. And shorting orders can also be like a kiss of death in this space. So I'm going to hear from people that are never do that. But I just would rather have cash and short some orders than have no cash and have extra inventory and be worried about trying to sell it. And so I would always err on the side of a shorter inventory cycle. That's one thing. Two, I would try to finance the inventory. I mean, I would, without equity, I would try to raise debt to support because it's just less dilutive. I would try to raise debt to support your inventory financing needs, particularly if you don't have great terms with your vendors, and early on you won't. And so I think you need some runway to be able to buy inventory and hold it so you can fill your order. So I would finance them to the extent you can. And then I would also, one of the things that's worked out really, really well for us, because, we manufactured our own products for about 1.5 years, and then we realized very quickly that we weren't great at that. So we outsourced manufacturing pretty early on. And I think kind of sub 50 million in revenue, if you can get on a turnkey model with your co-packers. I just think if you can get on a turnkey, kind of fully out the door, fully baked price with some payment terms, it's a great way to not have to hold raw materials that aren't turned into finished goods. You can also leverage their economies of scale, where if there's a certain ingredient garlic powder that they source for 10 of their customers, you get access to that garlic powder at a much lower price than you would if you tried to buy it on your own. And so we've always worked with our co-packers on kind of turnkey models with that. And look, there's an argument oh, well, you're going to lose a little bit of margin doing that, but also cash is king, man. And I think those first few years are so critical. And if you can, leverage your co-packers' economies of scale on ingredient sourcing, and then also just get a one price out the door with a net 30 payment term to your co-packer, buys you enough time to hold that inventory and sell it and start to collect money. So, I think, again, the big thing is I wouldn't go long on inventory. I'd err on the side of caution there. Hold on to your cash. I would finance it without equity and try to have debt support that if that's the path. And then I would do everything in my power to negotiate a turnkey co-packer model. If you don't manufacture your own products, I would get on that model so that you can kind of leverage their economies of scale and maybe even buy yourself a little bit more time to float the inventory.
Love it. There's the answer.
1, 2, 3.
Jason, I dig how just open and vulnerable you are. And anytime I've heard you talk, it seems like you really want to help entrepreneurs figure out things that you already figured out earlier on and get there faster. And you're always sharing all your information stories with them. And love how you now taken that into this personal content. It's kind of behind the scenes, a day in the life of what you're experiencing, and going and meeting with retailers or the sales process, whatever you're doing your day. And how tricky was that for you? Is it super comfortable to kind of now embody this personal brand that goes with the company's brand? Or did it feel, a little challenging to get yourself there at first?
It's still fresh for me, but so first and foremost, we're all pretty, what's interesting about this, I think all business, but consumer products in particular, I think a lot of us are like we hold our cards pretty close. And like, there's a lot of sort of like unspoken things that are out there. And then everyone's afraid to talk about like what's really going on, for whether or not they're afraid of like revealing some sort of trade secret, or they're going to get in trouble because the distributor doesn't want them to talk about like, that bill back or whatever it was that happened. And I think we need a lot more transparency in the space. So that's just like sort of like how I think. But I've always operated behind the scenes. And I come from the generation, like I was a grown up when social media became a thing. And so it's like a little bit more foreign to me than it personally than it might be to others. And it just never came naturally. And so I just shied away from it. The business has always had sort of a presence on social media, and it kind of puts out content, and it does its thing. But I always wanted to kind of operate behind the scenes and not really be on the forefront. I realized today that I might be doing the brand a disservice by not sort of, letting my voice be heard and kind of sharing more of whether it be just sort of behind the scenes of the company and what it really takes to build something like this. I think the next generation consumer wants a more intimate relationship with the brands that they're going to consume. And so I think I have the opportunity to do that. So I kind of had to like really get outside of my comfort zone. It is very uncomfortable for me to sort of, enter the world of social and like enter this world where like I'm just revealing things that nobody ever really sees. I'm still figuring it out, but I don't know that I'm more comfortable with it than I thought I would be. I think the anxiety of it all and sort of like the churning in my mind of what it would be like was a lot heavier than actually doing. Now we'll see. We'll see if people resonate with it. It's still early, but no, I'm enjoying it.
Trolls coming after you.
Not yet. Not yet. Wait till I make a really controversial statement about an ingredient or something, then they'll come after me.
As someone who runs a marketing company, I can absolutely relate to that. It's a shift in your mind of figuring out how to bring in that, personal brand. But I completely agree with you. Like, I know I'm attracted to brands where I'm, kind of learning from the founder what their reason was for starting it, what they're working on now. And it is a gift to other entrepreneurs that you do that, because then, like you said, transparency is so just helpful. And so many people are still like thinking more from a competitive mindset instead of an abundance mindset, and we can all win at this thing together.
That's right. Particularly in the natural foods business, it's always been fascinating to me that like brands will then start to compete with each other that do similar things. And I get that. Like, I understand sort of like the human nature part of that, but also like usually the reason like why both of those brands got involved is very similar, and they're kind of taking on like, some big issue up here where like maybe it's a much larger, legacy brand that's producing a really shitty product that people want to, like, and it's like we both there's room, but I don't know, we end up doing this, and it's like we're both sort of on a very similar mission. Like we aren't the enemy. Like, that's who we're going after. We're not going after each other. But it's always been interesting to me how we sort of get really competitive with each other. Even, when I go to the big trade shows and stuff and I hear other brands and they're like, did you see what this brand's doing? And I'm like, you guys are all on the same team, man. But I don't know why people don't necessarily see it like that.
Jason, we have a couple questions from Becky. Double question here. Where do your current efforts lie? Deeper distribution or broader distribution? And then the second question is, are you activating your marketing efforts more in store or digitally in a post-COVID era?
Yeah. Today, I think it's deeper than broader. It's sort of the love the one you're with mentality. It's very expensive to expand distribution, and the cost of slotting, the cost of free fill, and all of the things that come with and then marketing to a new consumer base and a new market potentially is very, very expensive. The trap for early stage entrepreneurs in this space is to go wide very quickly. I did it. I'm very familiar with what that is like, and I think that that's a very expensive road to go down. And so again, if you're well funded, and I mean far better funded than I ever was, go do that. But I think we've learned from those mistakes. Today, it's about increasing velocities at existing retail partners, going deeper with those relationships, launching innovation with those, Doesn't mean we completely ignore the idea of expanding distribution and adding new points of distribution, but we're much more strategic about it today. And we're much less likely to like go into some retailer where it's like 50-50 on whether or not we can perform there yet. And we're going to pay some extraordinary slotting fee and then spend a bunch of marketing dollars to support that account. So today it's deeper rather than broader is the answer to that question. And then as it relates to, marketing efforts in store, digitally post COVID, they go hand in hand today, unfortunately, sort of because a lot of consumers shop digitally for in-store efforts. Think we use platforms like Instacart or Shipt or, the .com of whatever retailer it is we're doing business with. And so I think you have to have that sort of digital presence dialed in, and you have to use your marketing efforts on those platforms so consumers see you because so many people use it. I mean, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but like in our household, like Target, like, we don't go in anymore. It's like, you order the pickup or you order the drive up or you get it delivered. And so it's like, if you're not marketing to me on the Target app, then like probably not going to get me. That said, the fundamentals of retail activation still ring true. I think the absolute most effective ROI on your money spent with retail distribution is at the point of purchase when the consumer is in the store shopping. So trade spend and activations within our retail stores that we're in are very, very important to us. And I just think they go hand in hand. I think the question though might have been related to like online advertising and platforms like Facebook and Google and Instagram and things like that. We do very little of that because that's really, really top of funnel. And with limited advertising spend, we have to sort of focus on those lower funnel activations as opposed to, if I had unlimited funds, we do all of it. Online outside of like the shopping cart platforms or Amazon once again, but I look at Amazon very similarly as I do to a brick and mortar retailer where people's wallets are open. They're actively shopping for something. I want to activate them while they're doing that. So it's really all kind of lower funnel tactics that we tend to focus on.
So then I have two questions from that, not directly from that, but where does the term sloppy joes come from? And second question is, how have you created complementary products from your original beef jerky product?
Well, let me answer the second one first, and then because it'll lead right into sloppy joes. So when we crossed categories and got out of beef jerky and went into marinades, like it wasn't supposed to happen, and so we were attempting to scale up manufacturing of beef jerky, and we had two facilities making the same product, but the products coming out of the two facilities were different. So we thought we would mitigate like some of that by pre-making the marinade and shipping it into both so that we just controlled the variable. Like they're not going to swap out a different brand of lemon juice today, right? And that did help. It didn't solve the problem entirely, but it helped. And while we were making this marinade separately for meat snacks, we were getting bottles of it shipped to our office. And they were stacking up in the corner. And one of our guys was like, I'm going to go grill this weekend. I'm taking all that stuff with me. And we all laughed. We thought it was a joke. Like, no way. And he did. And he cooked with it. And it tasted really good. And we're like, that's cool. Did we just make a product? So I sent it to a friend at Whole Foods, and who was a regional buyer at Whole Foods at the time. And that buyer tried it, liked it, gave me good feedback on it, and asked me if we were going to launch it. I'm like, nah, man, we make meat snacks. I don't know. Well, probably the most serendipitous moment of our business was that particular regional buyer, in a very short time thereafter, moved to Austin, and took a global category manager position. And their first category was condiments. And he called and said, hey, do you want to launch that stuff? It's my first category, and I'd like to launch it. And so we didn't have national distribution with Whole Foods at the time. And all of a sudden there's an opportunity to launch a product there and sort of get the foot in the door. So I flew to Austin to have this discussion, and like, we couldn't pass it up. It just felt like we have to do this. And what happened, Brad, was that the marinade performed really well because it was clean, it tasted really good, and it made cooking really, really easy. And then they called us 6 months later and said, what's in your innovation pipeline for sauces? And we said nothing. We make meat snacks. And they're like, well, we think you should make some more sauces. And we said, well, what do you think we should make? I don't know what we should make. So what happened from there is like, it started this collaborative relationship with them where it was like, well, where do you see the gaps in the category? Where's the consumer being, underserved? And how does our brand fit into that narrative? And how might we serve them in that way? And, when we launched like a low sugar, clean label barbecue sauce, like that didn't really exist. Not even at Whole Foods. Like it was clean label, but like it's still high sugar. And so that sort of like just broadened our mind to like, oh man, like there are all these gaps in all these categories where there's a consumer looking for something that they can't currently get. And so that's kind of how we think about innovation today. If we can't make it better, or if we can't improve on something that's in the market already, like we're not going to make it. But we usually collaborate. Like we've got a couple of retail partners and a couple of good relationships that we usually start with phone calls to them and say, we've got this idea, or, hey, what are you seeing? And how do you think we could fit into that? And so we kind of have this really great, now that took years, that's 5 or 6 years in the making of a relationship. That took 2 tattoos at Expo West with category managers to like get there and get on that level. But that's how we do it. So, anyway, our latest product, which we just announced yesterday, which is what you asked me about, was is we're reinventing the Sloppy Joe mix, and we just launched a product called the Sloppy Joseph, because we've got to elevate old Sloppy Joe, and what's really interesting is that product is it's a category that hasn't been disrupted in ever. Manwich launched their item in the 1960s, I think. And I think it's had high fructose corn syrup in it since. And that's, whatever, to each his own. But I'm not going to feed it to my kids. And so my kids are 6 and 8. And sometimes I need a quick weeknight meal. And who doesn't like a good sloppy Joe? I grew up on them. And so I couldn't bear to serve them the can of Manwich. So I started making it homemade. And then I realized, well, I make sauces already. Why don't we just make this and put it out there without high fructose corn syrup and give the consumer something that's better? And so when I was doing research on the product and like, should we do it and all of that, I found out that like the name, now there's a couple of stories out there, but the one that sort of like holds the most weight is the name came from this bar down in Key West that Ernest Hemingway used to go and write and drink at. And he would pull up at the bar, and the bar was owned by a guy named Joe. And so, the bar was always dirty. And Hemingway used to just sort of like poke at this guy all the time. Like, dude, your bar is dirty. Like the floor is gross. It's sloppy in here. And so he started calling the bar Sloppy Joe's. And so, this World War II era, food where we were dumping tomato sauce and vinegar and spices on ground beef to get it to stretch further and make sandwiches for soldiers. This sort of like thing took on this name from this bar that Hemingway used to drink at. So I just thought that was absolutely fascinating, behind the scenes anyway. But the Sloppy Joe comes from the bar down in Key West and has not been disrupted in 70 years. And so I'm here to at least give it a shot. We'll give it a run.
The Hemingway connection is very unexpected.
It is. I had no idea.
Jason, I was on a call with you and one of the Whole Foods regional buyers, and it was obvious you are a Whole Foods just golden child, and they were singing your praises. And I'm just curious, like how did that relationship build? What do you think you're like bringing into that makes that so? I know that they mentioned on the call that, packaging is so important, and also the storytelling aspect. Do you think it's because you just nailed that from the beginning, or are you just really working that relationship and staying in contact with those buyers all the time to keep developing that?
I don't know that I still don't know that I've nailed packaging. So let me just qualify that with like, if you talk to people on my team, they're always like, stop making packaging changes. And I'm like, no, but we got to fix this. So, packaging is one of those things that is, that I wish I was really, really great at. But I think we've had good instincts when it comes to design and, really is, beautifully aesthetics. But I don't know that we've always like called out the right things large enough or like emphasized the right call outs for the, the product attributes in the right way. It's all been an evolution. I think at Whole Foods for us, it started with that collaborative relationship where we were just willing to do something that they wanted us to do. And it worked. And so I say this all the time, ideas are easy, execution is hard. I think a little bit of luck in there with like timing of certain products, and they worked, certainly at play. But also like our team fucking executed. Sorry, forgive my language, but like they executed and like they crushed it. And anytime there was a mistake, they fixed it, and they fixed it fast. And so I think retailers respect that. We've also been willing to support the relationship. Like, when changes happen internally and they have to change fee structures or they have to change promotional plans and programs, like we've always rolled with it. Even if we like kind of grumble when something like changes that we don't agree with, like we've always rolled with it. And I think that goes a long way. I also think that Whole Foods in general, historically, has liked to lean into challenger brands and emerging brands. And they've really supported local and regional brands really well. That's kind of been their secret sauce. And we've just been one of them that grew into a national brand with them. So I think it's a mixture of things, but I think it begins and ends with the relationships. Like I think that's a huge part of it, because if you have those, like they'll tell you if something's wrong. Like you'll get an early warning, like, dude, this product sucks, or like you got to figure this one out, or you guys have a big issue here. Like they'll tell you, and then it gives you a chance to respond. Versus if you don't have the relationship, you might have to wait till like you finally get this random meeting 6 months later and they go, oh yeah, we're cutting you, or something like that. So we can't have relationships like that with every retailer, but we have sort of like stood on that as a pillar of our brand building, is to really just like own the relationships with the key retail partners where we can, and just have ongoing collaborative conversations. And it's sort of like it's just one of those things you have to nurture.
As you said the phrase, I really want your autobiography to be called The Secret Sauce.
That'd be good. That'd be really good.
Okay,
yeah.
You heard it here first.
Heard it here first. Love
some
it.
royalties.
There we go. We have a couple other questions from the listeners here. From Emily, what was the biggest mistake you made, and what was the lesson you learned from it?
Oh God, this is so fun. I don't know if I can pinpoint like the biggest. I could probably give you like 20 mistakes. I think that going too wide too early was the hardest thing we ever did, and it was probably the biggest mistake we made. We talked about that earlier. If I could do it over again, I could have saved a lot of money, a lot of equity. If I didn't have to raise as much money to support how wide we went, how early we went. And if I could do it over again, I would have narrowed that focus. If you were to say, Jason, if you were to launch a brand just like you have today and start over, I live in the Southeast. I would launch in the Southeast. I would own the Southeast. I would make sure the Southeast is crushing. And I would likely have a really strong Amazon or digital presence, and just crush it there. And then I would go to the next region. And then after I crushed that region, I would go to the next. Whereas, what we did was, it was like, I was selling to mom and pop shops up and down the street in Charleston and trying to sell to Earth Fair, and then also selling to stores in Northern California and stores in Seattle, and like trying to figure out how to navigate all that and those different markets and those different personalities and those different buying habits, and the cost of entry to all of those places, and then the cost of distribution to all of those places. It was very, very expensive, and I had to go raise a ton of money to support it. And very candidly, I could have, focused those dollars in my own backyard and probably accelerated my trajectory. And so that's what I would do differently. It's probably the biggest thing I would do differently today. But, we could also have 10 of these conversations about the 50 mistakes I've made over time. But I think that's probably the biggest one that I still have to, I'm still accounting for. Like, it's just still part of what we do. I'm still accounting for how wide we went, how early it was.
We have another question, which is, what have you done to attract talent and staff that believes in your brands and your products in the same way that you do? The question should probably be, have you done that?
Yeah, look, I've gotten really lucky. I wish I had secret sauce here. I would tell people, like I think that's paramount. I think that if they are not extraordinarily passionate about the mission of the brand, I don't care how good they are at their job, you shouldn't hire them. And I've I made that. I mean, we have meat snacks brand. Like, we hired somebody who didn't eat meat, and I don't want to we don't discriminate, right? So it's like, yeah, okay, whatever. But like,
trolls are about to start. You're about to finally have your trolls of all the non-meat eaters now.
But if you don't eat the meat, like, it's really hard for you to tell people how great it is. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's really, really hard for you to express like how important this is. So, I've just found, fortunately, most of the people with the people with the longest tenures and the people who have been the most impactful to our business are people who have just kind of found us, and they've showed up at the doorstep and they've said, hey, I believe in what you're doing and I want to play a role, and here's how I think I can serve the business. Do you have a space for me? And it's been really, really incredible to witness. And so I think that's paramount beyond the skill set. And then I think that, networking within the industry, you can find those people. Like, you just we've used corporate recruiters as well, over time to fill very specific niche kind of roles. But my best hires have always come from, my industry networking and who knows who. And, Brad, for example, Brad and I have known each other a very long time. And as he mentioned, we were the first client of theirs in CPG, which, I'll carry that flag. That's pretty cool. But, when we graduated from Brad's organization, we went to a different organization who's just sort of a little further up the chain in terms of brand sizes. And when I needed to hire a CFO full time, I just started calling around people I'd worked with and said, hey, who do you know that's out there that would fit this brand? And they knew. They were like, hey, here's a guy who's getting ready to hit the market, and the dude's awesome, and he believes in X, Y, and Z. Oh, and he's also a good CFO. And it's like, right. And so that's how that usually comes up.
Mm-hmm. And I would attest to that, just as a fellow business owner. In terms of looking forward, you talk about forecasting and, the sloppy Joseph, and like, what other challenges are you looking, to conquer the next 2-3 years?
I think we just want to scale now profitably. I think, as we think about, innovation is always going to be a part of who we are. And we're always going to launch, have something new in the pipeline. Growing brand awareness now, with products in almost 10,000 stores, but people don't know who we are at scale. Like, we need to grow brand awareness and household penetration. That'll require scaling the business up, but we want to do that in a way that we don't bleed cash. And so I think, just running a really fundamentally sound business first and foremost, while scaling and gaining household awareness and penetration is kind of the primary focus today. A lot of brands say, hey, listen, just grow top line, go as fast as you can. That is not the game we're in right now. And I don't think that's the game anybody in early stage CPG should be in. And all the way back to, it's come up 3 or 4 times in this conversation, cash is king. And so to the extent that we can scale and grow profitably and run a really fundamentally sound business, that's our challenge. And that's what we've got to focus on. And that's not easy, because it's very easy to get distracted and see that, ooh, that shiny new retailer over there wants 3 or 4 of your products. Like, let's go get it, and all of a sudden there's a $200,000 investment you have to make in distribution and trade spend and all those things that, you're chasing this shiny new thing, when, that money could be put to use in other ways. So I think for us, it's keeping the blinders on, staying extremely focused on the broader, on the greater mission, which is, grow household penetration and brand awareness, and do that without bleeding a bunch of cash.
It's great advice.
Yeah,
Jason, I have a closing question for you.
Okay.
Are there any podcasts, books, or entrepreneurs that just really inspire you?
Man, I'm inspired by so many people. So yes, I got a ton of books, but I read a lot of books on psychology these days, like human psychology. I just finished The CEO Next Door, which was very good. That was a little less psychology, a little more practical. I follow a guy. I live in Nashville now, so I follow a guy named Donald Miller who lives here, and he started a company called Story Brand, and he kind of filters building a brand through the same framework and storytelling through the same framework that like Hollywood producers do for movies. And so Donald Miller has some really, really great practical small business brand building advice. And so his books and his podcasts are excellent. And I follow those pretty closely. I like Michael Hyatt's leadership training. I think he does a really excellent job there. I like John Acuff as an author and as a podcast guy. He also has a really kind of down to earth way of conveying his concepts in a way that's really, really easily digestible. I could probably give you a list of 20 things. I was never voted most likely to anything in school, and like I didn't play sports and didn't win awards for anything like that. But where like I feel like I've been able to sort of like compete with really, really smart people like Brad is that like I just
me, Jason.
I read I just poking at Brad because it's fun. No, like I read a ton of books, man. I listen to as many people as I can. Like something's always in my ear, something's always in front of me. I'm always trying to like just get better and know more and be a better human. And so like I don't know, like I'll read 15 books a year, and they're all good. Like I take something from all of them. But locally, I follow a guy locally who's Don Miller, and I think he's excellent. And John Acuff, I think he's excellent. And Michael Hyatt, I think, are excellent. Those are three.
It's awesome. Well, thanks for being with us today. It's nice to see someone succeed who's also such a great human and here to help so many other people, other entrepreneurs, and they will all stay following the brands. Everyone's going to go get a sloppy Joseph right away. Everyone's going to read your book, The Secret Sauce. Thanks so much, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Thanks, Jason.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, guys.